You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hey guys, welcome back to the show. You're listening to episode number 357 of Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. We've got another very full show today and a bit of a departure. Today, our main guest is a member of the board of the Appalachian Long Distance Hikers Association, ALDHA. We've had Appalachian Trail Conservancy people on a few times before, but never anybody from ALDHA, as far as I know. John Jordan reached out to me several weeks ago and we arranged to talk. He's got a specific interest, which he's going to be sharing, but really, he's one of these good people doing good things for hikers that often go unrecognised. So I wanted to bring him into the light a little. John will be on shortly. Then Dale Shutkowski joins the Mighty Blue class of 23, and you will instantly understand why I suggested that he should consider the trail name of Santa when you see his picture in the show notes. As you may recall, Lynn Savino finished the show last week with a run-through of her first aid list for hikers. This week, Lynn turns her attention to hypothermia, a very frightening condition, as you'll hear from my occasional comments as we speak. Lynn is very organised and has provided me with some documents to teach you more about this subject and a copy of her first aid list from last week's show. Unfortunately, my technical prowess may have screwed up trying to get it to you via the show notes, but I'm going to put a link in there anyway, and you may have to ask permission to view it. If I can work out how to improve that process next week, I certainly will. Finally, today we're back with the rest of Chapter 12 of George Stefanos' epic recounting of his 1980s thru-hike of the Appalachian Trail in Then the Howl Came. George passes the 1,000-mile marker and is about to enter Pennsylvania. But let's start with one of our unsung heroes, a member of the ALDHA board, John Jordan, or Morning Glory. We've got a section hiker for today's guest. This is John Jordan. Hey John, thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure.
And the main reason you're on the show today isn't necessarily about your hiking, although we are going to ask about that. It's because you can tell us about an organisation that affects all hikers on the AT, ALDHA. And you're a board member of ALDHA, aren't you?
Yes, I am. A new one, actually.
A new one, that's right. So that's what we want to talk about, being on ALDHA and what ALDHA is all about. But you are a hiker. So before we get on to talking about ALDHA, let's fill in a few details about your and your family's own backpacking experience. I mentioned you're a section hiker. What have you done? And are you looking at a section through hike at some stage?
Yes, actually, I've done everything from Amicalola, Springer Mountain, even the Approach Trail, up to Partnership Shelter near Marion, Virginia.
All right, so you've done quite a bit of it. Have you done sort of connected miles, or are you looking to do bits where you can?
I'm actually looking at just some life circumstances that are going to allow me to attempt to do one long hike from Partnership to Katahdin, probably in 2025.
All right.
Maybe 20. I may have to put it off 1 year, but life circumstances should allow me to at least attempt that. And if I want to, I might make it a flip-flop and do like what's considered, I guess would be considered a true through hike.
Well, that's what I was wondering, actually, because we did talk about that the other day, and you said you wanted to do a lash along our section hike. But wouldn't you be? I mean, I presume this is something to do with retirement, is it? I mean, you're in your 50s now.
I'm 51. It would have nothing to do with retirement. I just have a job that gives me part of my job allows me a lot of free time.
Okay.
It still won't be truly fun because I would have to be checking with it several times a week as I have a signal on the trail.
Sure.
Probably 5 hours a week or something like that. But it would allow me plenty of time to still hike it every day.
Well, wouldn't you be tempted though to do a through hike from beginning to end? I know if I was in that situation, I would think, oh, I might as well. You know what? I know you've done already to a part of Virginia, but you know, have you thought about trying to do the whole thing in one go?
Yeah, yes, I have. So it just depends. I'm definitely not going to start again from Springer, but if things are going well and I make it to Katahdin, I definitely will be considering going back and doing a flip flop and starting again from partnership and heading south.
Nice.
There's no way I'm going to start at Springer again, though, just in case I get injured or something.
I bet you'd be tempted. And did you, by the way, so did you do that in short sections or, I mean, were you a day hiker or were you actually doing some overnights?
It was all overnights and a whole lot of weekend hikes. I did the Smokies all in a week.
Right.
A lot of 2, 3, 4 day hikes.
Nice.
In there,
nice.
Probably, I'm guessing 14 or 15 at least.
Worst part of that, of course, is that you have to get your legs every time. I don't know how you guys do that, but bless you, fantastic. And I know that your son was actually a through hiker, wasn't he? Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, had always been interested in what I was doing when he was a young kid, and you know, back when he was about 12 or 13, he started considering himself, and so he graduated from high school in 2020 and took a year of just working hard and saving up his money. And in 2021, he did his through hike.
Oh, did he? So tell us about that then. Was it eventful or was it, I mean, did it do stuff for him?
You know, I think it was just something he just got out of the way. He was really glad to be done. And,
really?
And just to be home and to get on with life. I guess he was your typical, you know, he didn't have any issues with post-hike depression or anything like that. It was just one of those things he was just checking off his list of things to do. That's kind of how it was for him.
You know what? At that age, it's good that he had a list, so that's fine, isn't it? Really?
Yep.
Yeah. And I took some notes, obviously, when we spoke before, and when we were talking about that, your son through hiking and so on. You said to me that Miss Janet had asked you to get involved in the AT for about 20 years. So tell us, I mean, how long have you been involved, and how long have you been doing these weekend hikes then?
I believe it was 2001 is when I had a friend and I decided just to do a section hike.
Sure.
And I think we were attempting to hike from Damascus to Hampton. And on that hike, I met the first through hiker I'd actually had any kind of conversation with.
Sure.
At one of the shelters along the way, and got to know him a little bit overnight. Loved his stories. And I had actually invited him to come, and when I lived in Johnson City, Tennessee at the time, so I invited him. Hey, when you get to Irwin, let me know, and I'll pick you up and give you a good dinner at night and let you spend the night.
Sure.
And he was telling me, yeah, I'll do that, but there's also a lady there I want to stay with. I've heard great things about her. Her name is Miss Janet. I never knew anything about Miss Janet, but he had told me so much about her. I was like, I want to meet that lady. So this is back in the days when she had her hostel there in Irwin on Elm Street. And
That's right.
I dropped him off there, but didn't stick around. And then somehow through my work, I attained this big box of soaps and shampoos from hotels. And I was trying to figure out what to do with it. And so I'll just go introduce myself to Miss Janet. So I remember the day just knocking on her door and seeing this lady come to the door and I said, "Are you Miss Janet?" She's like, "Yeah." So I introduced myself, and at that point, after we got to know herself, I got to know her a little bit. She became my main shuttle driver on a lot of stuff we were doing around anywhere between Damascus and Hot Springs, I guess, and just got to know her. And I remember back then she kept telling me, "You need to go to the gathering." I'm like, "What is that?" You know, she's like, "Oh, it's this organization and all this." And at least 15, 18 years she would bug me about that, and I never, I never bothered going until actually last year, 2021.
Yeah. Oh, right. That was your first time there. Oh, okay.
That was my first time there. You know, I decided to go that year because I'd been really involved in 2021 again, and kind of renewed my passion for the trail. Just seeing my son through hike and getting to know a lot of the other people on the trail that were part of his family or in his vicinity while he was hiking.
Sure.
And so there's an opportunity then to see some of them again at the gathering, because a bunch of us had decided to go.
So it sounds like you were more enthusiastic about your son's right than he was. he was just ticking off. But were you actually supporting it?
Might be true.
Were you supporting him on the way or what?
Yes, but it'd get to the point where my job would sometimes take me right up into Virginia, right up 81, Interstate 81 quite a bit. And so I knew I'd be, within an hour of him quite often. So I would quite often stop in and pick him up off the trail for the night, and ended up started doing that with some of his family also, which they were all scattered out. They were a tramley, but not really they weren't all hiking together all the time. At some points they were weeks apart. But and there's even one time where I was going to see him, and he had a couple of his friends that were like 5-6 days behind him, and I went and grabbed them for the evening and went out to eat and grabbed a hotel room for the night before I even went to go see him. So
wow. So
really made some really good friendships.
So the AT is in your family, and you're on the board of ALDHA. First, I mean, I know people know what is the Appalachian Long Distance Hikers Association is, but a lot of people who listen to this show don't actually hike. I mean, quite a lot do, but quite a lot don't. So tell us exactly what ALDHA is and how it benefits hikers.
Our primary purpose is to help and encourage hikers, not so much the trail, as contrary to the ATC.
Yeah.
And we aren't just strictly about the Appalachian Trail too. We're also trying to promote some other long distance trails, primarily on the East Coast.
Right.
Too.
And you mentioned the ATC.
Mm-hmm.
If your primary purpose is to benefit hikers and the ATC is to look after the interests of the trail, is there a clash of philosophy between the two organizations, and is it a friendly rivalry?
That's a loaded question.
It's meant to be.
Yeah. Sometimes there is, and I think the big thing that really happened was in 2020 with COVID. The ATC would not give out any thru-hiker certificates.
Sure.
And ALDHA has been doing that for years. We have what we call a certificate we give to the thru-hikers called I hiked all the way.
Right.
And so we give it our own certificate to thru-hikers, people who've completed the trail, and we decided to do that in 20 and 21, even to non-members of ALDHA.
So do you have any insights into how that decision was taken? Because the ATC's decision was panned by a lot of hikers. I don't want to get controversial with people there at all. I mean, they made they had a decision to do that. Do you happen to know what the thinking behind ALDHA giving out those certificates was?
I do not know that, but I think there was quite a bit of disagreement between the board members at that time with the ATC's decision on that.
And is that clash, as it were, of philosophies? Has that kind of sort of sorted itself out a bit over the last couple of years? Because hopefully, the best interest of hikers and the best interest of the trail is important.
Yeah, to some degree, yes. The difficult thing is that we don't want ALDHA to be seen as the anti-ATC.
No, of course.
We aren't trying to promote that by any means, because ATC definitely has their place, and we need them for what they're doing.
Yes, we do.
To protect the trail.
Yeah.
They're a much, much bigger organization than we are also.
Right.
So among the hiking community, quite often we are seen as the anti-ATC just because we did decide to give out our certificates.
Yes, and I think that's unhealthy. I think that's an unhealthy thing. I don't think people should feel that way about it. And that does worry me a bit, because we need both the ATC to look after the trail and we need ALDHA to look after the hikers. So I think it's important that it is a friendly, I wouldn't say rivalry, but it should be a friendly relationship. And if you've got differences in philosophy, then you should have those conversations. But once something's done, it's done. So let's move on and do it.
Exactly. And
that's how of everybody.
We're trying to be very careful on that.
Right.
We want to have a good relationship with hikers.
Sure.
And those that, there are quite a few hikers out there that blame, and quite often there is a misunderstanding of, they get mad at anybody who does work for the ATC, even maintainers and stuff like that.
That's terrible.
And that's not
fair
terrible.
At all. Yes,
it is terrible.
That is awful.
It is.
And I think we need both in my view, we need both organisations. So you went along to the gathering in 2021 because your son did the hike and you joined the board. I mean, how did that sudden thing happen? Did they say who wants to join the board and you put your hand up or what?
Yeah, it was kind of crazy. So ALDHA has a program called ALDHA Care.
Right.
At that time, it was meant to support the hostels. It was. And what they've been doing for several years is giving out a gift box to low-cost hostels.
Sure.
That were either zero cost or very low cost, and it was just a little box of some cleaning supplies just to help kickstart their season.
Sure.
And I think they had also offered to one hostel a free spring cleanup where you get some volunteers to come and get their hostel ready for the season.
Right. Interesting.
Okay. So, so they had a thing on their website, or maybe at the gathering even too. Hey, we need some people to help with ALDHA Care if you could deliver some of these boxes.
Sure.
So I was like, I've been looking for a way to get more involved. So I saw that and I sent an email and said, hey, I'd like to get involved with this ALDHA Care thing. I don't mind delivering some boxes. And I got an email back, and they forwarded it to certain people and said, you'll be hearing back from us in the first of the year sometime. So at that point, I think it'd become mid-January, early February, and I hadn't heard anything back. So I sent another email, said, hey, I would still really like to get involved with this. I hadn't heard anything.
Right.
And within a week, I get a phone call from this fellow named Dennis Newton, who I'm now really good friends with. He was the coordinator for ALDHA. He is the current coordinator for ALDHA, or some people call him like the president, but we don't have those names, just a coordinator. Sure. And he starts telling me a little bit about it and then says, would you like to just coordinate the ALDHA Care program for us?
Wow.
And
this is the problem about volunteering and sticking your hand up all the time. People will take you up at your word, won't they?
And so I'm like, well, this sounds like fun. Yeah, I thought about it for a little bit, and I was like, oh, I'll give that a shot. And little did I know, we did the boxes again last year, to about 100 different hostels.
Right. Wow.
Yeah. And for about 2 or 3 months, my living room seriously was like a shipping warehouse.
I bet it was, yeah.
And my whole plan was to get a whole group of 5 or 6 volunteers to help out with this. Right. As I started doing it, I was enjoying so much just meeting the hostel owners, the ones that had time to actually meet with me and talk with me.
Sure.
I was enjoying. Some of them are some really, really great hostels, but they were so busy, didn't have time to really sit down and chat.
Sure.
So I ended up delivering every box between Georgia up to Harper's Ferry.
Oh my gosh, dear me!
I'm thinking it was probably about 65 at that point.
So what's in the? So hang on, tell us what's in the box then. What you say is cleaning supplies? Is it just cleaning supplies or what?
Yeah, we put a big bottle of Dawn dish detergent in there, I think, and a big box, a lot of them got a big thing of hand sanitizer.
Right. Yeah. Very necessary.
And then we had some basic cleaning supplies, like toilet bowl cleaner, shower cleaner. I put some nice cleaning cloths in there. There might have been maybe some glass cleaner, that kind of thing.
And how long has this been going on then? This hostel care? I didn't know it existed. You kind of would have assumed that most hostels probably have those supplies, but it's a nice. Hang on. I think it's a nice link of the organisation reaching out to them and having that contact and bringing something to them, for nothing virtually. You said. I think that's a pretty good thing. How long has that actually been going on then?
That's a good question. I know one of the past coordinators started it, and I want to say about 4 or 5 years,
Right. Okay.
maybe. I think maybe 2018 may have been the first year, but I'm not for sure about that. It hasn't been going on real long.
And this year, you've now been in position for a year, and you're looking at you, and you've gone from Springer up to Harper's. What are you looking at in terms of what you're going to do for 2023, and then what about beyond? What are you going to do in the future with this?
Sure. So, one thing, if any hostel owners are listening to this, don't be disappointed right initially here. I think we're going to discontinue the boxes.
All right.
Because it is a logistical nightmare.
I'm sure. I'm sure. Yeah.
Getting these things all packed up. And then we realized I realized that we had spent $200 just on boxes themselves and
Wow.
tape and labels. And this stuff was just going in the garbage after delivered.
Yeah.
So we're trying to be a little more careful how I spend our money that we have budgeted for this. Sure. So there is still going to be a gift of some sort going to every hostel that we find worthy.
Hang on. What now? That's interesting. What does that mean? Mm-hmm. What do you mean that we find worthy?
Okay. What I mean by that is we aren't looking for just a typical bed and breakfast or a hotel that sometimes will take in hikers.
Right. You actually want a hiker hostel, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we want actually a place that their primary reason for being in business is for hikers.
Sure.
And hikers are staying there and enjoying it.
Right. So in that case, what are you looking to achieve from the hostel care program going forward?
So we'll be doing that, but I'm hoping to add a couple new twists to this in the next this coming year.
Sure.
One thing I want to do is we actually did a small work project this past year, but what we want to do is have up to 2 service projects per year for hostels that need a small project to take place.
Nice.
Last year we built an outdoor shower for Rusty's Hard Time Hollow, which many people haven't heard about, but he's been around for like 40 years. Up off the Blue Ridge Parkway in Virginia. Right. We have about $500 to budget towards each project.
Sure.
Plus, we get some volunteers, but we'd be taking applications process for any hostel with a small project that would they'd like to get done and just don't have the means, the manpower, or the finances, or need some help with the finances to get it taken care of.
Sure.
Right now, I know there is a new hostel that's opening up in New York this year, and I've already talked with them, and they're actually willing to pay for it all. They just need some help putting bunks together and putting together a bathroom.
But the AT has always been a massive volunteer organisation. Anyway, is most of the volunteering through the ATC, or does does ALDHA have its own volunteer program?
We do. We do have volunteers. I mean, there's a whole lot that we do. I mean, all the board members are volunteers for one thing. But we're always looking for help for these kind of projects. We do outreach projects too. Several times a year, you'll see us along the trail, just trying to promote ALDHA. There'll be a hiker feed of some sort, telling hikers about ALDHA, and so we need people to help with that. I need volunteers for ALDHA Care.
Right. I bet you do. Having done it all, you could make. I'm just, as we're speaking, I'm thinking how you could make something much bigger out of it. To be honest with you, because some of these hostels must be needing help. And when we spoke, I think last time, you said you were actually looking for volunteers to actually help out in hostels. Is that to give some respite to the hostel owner, or just generally help out when they're short of staff?
Yeah. And that's another thing. We're going to be looking for volunteers that hostel, if they have a certain time or a week or two at a time where they could just use some extra hands to either help run shuttles or do dishes or do laundry or whatever needs to be done. I'm trying to find a group of volunteers that would be willing to spend a week or two out of their year going to help certain hostels with their day-to-day business, especially when the mass amount of bubble, the big large bubble comes through.
Yeah, but it does come through, but that's when they do what they do. That's when they do their business, such as it is. Mm-hmm. I can't imagine many hostels make a fortune out of this, to be honest with you.
No, I don't think any make a fortune.
But this will be an entire volunteer position. They go into the hostel, they help out the hostel owner, and they do what? Cooking, or you say just general odd jobs?
Yeah. Well, basically, there'll be an application that the hostel will have to fill out, and they'll say exactly what kind of help they're needing.
Right. And so you're looking for volunteers, but you're also looking for service projects. Are you actually actively seeking service projects from the hostels, or are you going to them and saying we can do small projects? I mean, how are you actually logistically doing this?
Both. And this year, actually, I will be visiting every single hostel myself.
Oh my gosh,
that's the plan.
Hang on. You've got a full-time job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How do you work out?
Pretty mobile.
How do you work out the time to do all of this then? If you're going to visit every hostel,
it will be it'll be put together slowly, weekend here or there, a few days. I mean, right now I live in Knoxville, Tennessee, so I'm a half day's drive from half the hostels.
Right.
Already.
Nice.
So
that's cool.
And I will be combining some of my trips. We have the AT kickoff that happens the first week of March.
Yeah.
We'll be doing that. I'll probably be doing some, visiting some hostels during that time. We actually have, I didn't tell you this, ALDHA's actually now sponsoring the Southern Ruck.
Okay.
And we're doing that in Hot Springs. It's a big gathering for hikers that know each other. It's been going on for years and years and years. But they came to us this year to ask us to run it for them because they were just lacking the help to do it. So the rucks are get-togethers. It's kind of like a family reunion on a smaller scale than the gathering. Right. But also we're looking for new hikers that are planning a long-distance hike in the next year or so, even 2023, and we will actually have people there to answer questions, do pack shakedowns, and then kind of just get used to what this crazy hiking community is all about.
Yeah, it's funny actually. We had a weekend at Woods Hole and we had pack shakedowns, and it was one of the most. It was instructive for all of us, even those of us who are meant to be shaking down other people's packs, to see what people deem as important in their pack is really interesting to see. And it's quite a few of the things that were in there surprised me. Then when I thought about it, I thought, yeah, that makes a lot of sense to be taking that. And most of the people had really thought about what goes into their pack. And I never did. I was a shocker. I just chucked everything in and chucked it away as I went along, I guess. Yeah. So if people are interested in helping out ALDHA specifically, and certainly, as we said, that they scored a lot of kudos in the hiking community by still giving out certificates, even though, we don't hike to get a certificate. It's kind of nice to recognise that we're being recognised, I guess. How do you want people to contact you to get involved, or do you want them to contact ALDHA indirectly? I mean, how do you want to do it?
ALDHA's website, ALDHA, Appalachian Long Distance Hiker Association.org. And there's all kinds of information. They can go to the ALDHA Care part. There's a link on there to email me if you're interested in helping.
Right.
And there's just a massive amount of information on there. And hey, I'd encourage people too. Right now, whenever this airs, it may have changed, but right now people can become an ALDHA member for just $10 a year.
Right.
And that actually gives you a free download of the Thru-Hiker's Companion in PDF format.
Nice. So you're doing this. This is a labour of love for you, obviously.
Yeah.
Are you? Where do you see it? The particularly the hostel care program. I think it's a really interesting idea with so much scope. Where do you see it being in 5, even 10 years' time?
Well, I would love for this to grow enough where we're just constant, instead of just 2 projects a year, maybe 5 projects a year. I'm looking for ideas too.
Right.
Hey,
Okay.
if you're a volunteer and you have an idea to help expand ALDHA Care, talk to me about it.
Right.
I'm a dreamer.
Yeah.
I love ideas.
Yeah. So, I think I can feel your passion. I can tell you how much you love it, and it's tremendous to hear. Look, I'm sure I speak on behalf of many when I tell you that for all the work that's been done on behalf of hikers by you guys and by the ATC for the trail is greatly appreciated. So thanks so much for coming on and telling us more about it. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, man.
Thanks for
you take it
me.
easy, okay? Cheers,
Okay.
then. What a nice self-effacing fella John is. That's the problem with volunteering sometimes. You put your hand up and they give you a job. But in John's case, you can hear the sincerity in his voice as he's giving back to his community. Without people like John, many of us wouldn't have had half the fun we did have when we were on our hikes. So I'm glad that we're able to shine a light on that work in some small way. I've added a couple of links to the show notes for ALDHA and ALDHA Care. Check them out. Now the Mighty Blue Class of 23. Dale Shotkoski appeared on my screen as we were about to record, and, well, you tell me what his trail name should be. Check out the show notes. Here's Dale. So I guess today is Dale Shotkoski, I believe it's pronounced. Is that right?
That's correct.
Well, welcome to the show, Dale, and welcome to the Mighty Blue Class of 2023.
Thank you.
And it's nice to have you on, and I'm asking pretty much the same sort of questions to people, and I might make a few changes as I'm going along. But the one thing I always want to know is, why are you doing this? You're like me. Well, you're younger than me, but you're not a young man. So why are you actually doing this?
I've always liked to see what kind of adventures I can find. And I've hiked a lot. I've done a lot of marathons, a lot of ultra runs, a lot of long distance cycling. And what I'm realizing that as the number in my age keeps getting bigger and bigger, the window of opportunity, of opportunity keeps getting smaller and smaller. So I want to try this and see if I can do this while I still physically can. I've had a number of health issues, and I've had some surgeries, and I've had other things that have brought home the reality of, if I want to go play, I better get out and play now while I can and take advantage of the time that I have.
So in terms of big adventures then, will this be your biggest you've done, or is this one in a series of big things you've been doing all your life?
This would be the biggest. This would be by far the biggest, because a lot of the adventures, like I said, involve trail running, marathoning, centuries bicycle rides, multi-day hikes, like small, like weeks, because while I've been employed, it's tough to get away for this amount of time. And so I'll be leaving work to start this adventure.
All right. So you're actually retiring. Do they know at work you're leaving? Because, by the way, 2 of my recordings, I've had to hold off because they haven't told their work they're leaving yet.
I've told them I'm leaving. They want me to stay, or they want me to come back when I'm done. I'm not sure that I want to do that. But I haven't given the final date yet of when my last day of work will be, but it'll probably be sometime in March.
All right. So you're planning to start as soon as you leave, or are you going to give it a couple of weeks after that?
When I leave work, I want to go see some family before I leave, so that I have a mother-in-law and my own mother that I'd like to visit. I also have I have children and grandchildren that I'd like to visit, as I'll miss most of the summer birthdays if I make it all the way. So I want to put in some family time and visit before I hit the road, so to speak, and get out of town.
So what does your family think about you doing this?
They've kind of grown used to me doing these things. They kind of scratch their heads, they shake their heads, but they know when I get something in my head that I really want to do, that's what I tend to do. I tend to go. You're
smiling at somebody in the distance in the camera, so.
Yes. I'm still at work, so there's still people walking outside the office.
Oh, right. You are still at work. Okay. So your hiking experience, you've done some over weekends and things like that. Have you done a week in the woods, or 2 weeks, or a month?
I recently, last fall, went up to South Dakota on the Centennial Trail. And
Right,
I did
nice.
about a 4.5 day hike up on the Centennial Trail. And I was told by everybody it had been extremely dry, carry a lot of water, do all that. And out of the 4 nights that I was out there, it rained 3 of the 4 nights. And so I walked in a lot of mud. I walked in a lot of water. Had heavy, heavy rains to deal with. So I got my kind of an AT experience, I guess, in a way, because I got soaked.
Yes. Yeah.
I got very, very soaked.
And was that for a shakedown hike to see how your gear worked?
Yes, it was. And
how
the
did
gear
it?
worked. It worked well. I have a big Agnes tent, and so it's a double wall, which I really appreciated in the rain. I stayed dry, and so that was pleasurable. And my pack worked. The equipment worked. I didn't take good care of my feet, though. My feet kind of blistered up and did things because I pushed about 70 miles in 4.5 days. So I was not taking it very easy on myself with wet feet and the weight. Came to the realization backpacking is different than hiking. That weight on the feet puts a lot of pressure on the feet, and I have to take better care of my feet.
Well, I've told people this in the past that I've hiked the AT twice now and never had a single blister. And yet I walked the Camino de Santiago in Spain, and at one stage I had more blister than foot. I think one of the reasons is because I start out slow. Starting out slow and not putting too much pressure on yourself, and doing 8 miles and be happy with 8 miles your first day, and first couple of weeks do 8 miles. Don't push yourself too high, because nearly 80 miles in 4 days is a push. It's a stretch, isn't it?
It is. And I have to learn that this isn't going to be a race. Like I said, a lot of my background is racing or doing events that have time limits. And I have to get out of that mindset that I have to push. And in those mindsets and stuff, you start a race, you start a marathon. If you've ever been to one, you see the excitement, you see the people cheering, you see the happiness, you see all that. But what I tell people is oftentimes during the race, I kind of call it a BB King moment. Where it's going to hit, where the thrill is gone, and that's when you have to then realize you got to put in the work, and you got to find a way mentally to push through and get there and do that. And so I've kind of had that tendency to just push when it gets hard. And after listening to you and many, many, many others, and a good friend of mine who's hiked the AT too, is like, do not push in those first few weeks. Get accustomed to it. Take it easy on your body. Let your body grow into the trail, or the trail will beat you. I mean, you can't beat it. It will beat you.
You cannot take it on. You cannot take it. And remember that there's a maxim that the last one to Katahdin wins. So if you want to win this race, get last. You'll be good. It won't be too much of a problem. So you've got your equipment. And you've prepared physically in a way. How about the mental side of it? You say you're determined to do things. Are you looking forward to those 2 and 3 shitty days you're going to get out on the trail, and everybody gets them? How are you going to cope with those sort of tough times?
That's a learning experience. I think it's going to be a learning experience, because what I've learned by doing hard things, I find things out about myself that I would have otherwise not known. And so when you put yourself out of your comfort zone and into difficult situations, sometimes you learn. Can I grow? Can I adapt? Can I learn how to get through this stuff?
Sure.
And mentally, again, knowing it's going to be hard. My wife is supporting me. My children are supporting me. They've contributed towards helping me buy gear and stuff. I know I have a lot of people that if I need to reach out, talk to somebody, I'll get a pep talk. I think I'll get plenty of pep talks if need be.
Do not come home. Do not come home. You spent all this money on this. Do you spend all this money on this? You're staying there. So get out there.
Yes, exactly.
And is your wife going to resupply you from home, or are you going to resupply it on the trail?
It'll be a combination. I will have some things that she will ship from home. I'll have to make sure on different medications that I'm on and different things to make sure that if I can't find them on the trail, that she can have a backup plan to make sure I get those sorts of things. But a lot of it will probably come from the trail, because even from the short hiking that I've done, sometimes if I push too hard, it's hard to eat. Food doesn't taste good until you get hungry enough. And then, and something that might be really tasty, I think I'm going to like at home, when I've got out on trail, looked in the bag before, it's like, I don't want it. So I think I'm going to be as flexible as possible and adapt as needed.
There will come a day when you will eat anything that's in front of you, and then the same thing all over again. So don't worry about all that.
Okay.
That's going to come to you. And In terms of your expectations, I presume, like everybody else, you expect to be able to finish. But what are you kind of thinking that this is something? I mean, are you going into it with the idea of finishing, or going into it with the idea of having a great adventure, whether that's 1,000 miles, 2,000 miles, or whatever?
My expectation is I want to basically just show that I'm willing to take on hard things. I'm willing to try difficult things, get out of my comfort zone. And just by making it to the trail, I consider that, with the different health issues that I've had, I consider that a win. If I get
I 100% agree with you.
And I set foot on the trail and I'm trying it, I've already won. And so my first day, if I get there and I'm walking, I've won. Everything after that is bonus, because I'm lucky to be there. I'm happy to be there. And every day I wake up and get to try it again, it's another win. It's just another bonus. It's another bonus day.
Yeah, and we haven't shared it, and we haven't shared it between either of us, but I'm not asking you what it is. But are you expecting to be able to get off some of your medications as a result of this walk? Because you will lose weight. I don't know how much you weigh. I can't really see from there, but you will lose quite a bit of weight anyway. Are you looking forward to that?
The weight, not really. The weight isn't going to be an issue. My health issues, I'm on some medicines I'll be on the rest of my life, and so that really won't change because of this. And even with all the different running, training, cycling, and other stuff that I've done, medications with my health issues are just going to be a part of my life.
And of course, people can't see you right now, but you've already got the beard started, haven't you?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's going to be a nightmare when you finish. You'll be down your knees.
Well, I may have to trim it up a little bit before I start,
No,
which is
don't.
unusual.
Keep it going. Oh my gosh, you've got it all there. You've got it all going on. You're going to look like a hiker straight away. And are you going to cook, or are you going to cold soak?
I've tried both. And the other friend that I know who's hiked it, he started off cooking and went more towards cold soaking as he went on, simply because he got tired of cooking. I've tried cold soaking, and when I'm cold and when it was raining in South Dakota and everything else, I didn't take my stove, and I wish I would have. So I think I will start with a stove, but it'll be, again, how much I use it. I don't want to be dependent on it. Not a coffee drinker. I don't have to have warm food. But I think warm food will really taste good at times. So
it will. And you know what? One of the great things I wasn't expecting from the trial was the social aspect at night at shelters. You don't sleep in the shelter necessarily. You sleep in your tent or in a hammock or whatever. But there tend to be quite a few picnic tables right outside the shelters, and people gather there and cook their food, and they will scooch up to let the other ones in and so on. And it is a wonderful, such a communal eating thing that I think cooking, by cooking, you're basically boiling hot water and pour it into some dehydrated stuff. But really, it is such a wonderful part of the trail. I would certainly try it if I were you to start with. If you want a cold soak later, fine. But it is pretty lovely, the whole idea of all sitting down together, all ages, all getting your food at the same time. I think you'll find you'll enjoy that more than you might think.
I'm kind of looking forward to that, because my other experiences are usually solo. I'm out there and I may run across another person or two, but where I've gone in the Rocky Mountains and where I've gone off into South Dakota, you may be lucky to see another person that in a day. And so the social aspect of this will be new. It'll be a new thing for me.
Yeah. Well, on the AT, you may be lucky not to see somebody for 5 minutes. So, look forward to that. So what are you most looking forward to? Is it the views? Is it the people? Is it the experience? What is it you're looking forward to?
All the things you said, plus how will I grow? How can I grow and become just more in touch with the beauty of just our planet, just our whole world, and the people. I include people in that. We're all linked. We're all tied together. So how can I become better at just contributing to our planet and our world?
Good for you, man. And what are you least looking forward to?
Feet issues, since I've been through those before. Feet issues, and I know, like you said, I've been wet for multiple days at a time. It can weigh on you, but again, that's part of it. Going in, that's going to be part of it. So you have to accept what it gives you, and again, if you can adapt to it and accept it, you can get through that.
Have you tried to do anything particular about your feet? I mean, are you wearing two pairs of socks or anything like that?
Yeah, I tried using the Injinji liners along with Darn Tough socks and stuff, and I tried that. And I think a matter of keeping them clean, because I started with a lot of dirt, rock, and that sort of stuff, and then shaking them out, keeping them clean, so you don't get the grit in your socks that's going to contribute to blisters. Airing my feet out when they're wet, making sure they can have chances to dry out, and just different foot care things that I'm learning along the way.
Yeah, good. And what about a trail name? I can think of one right away. Santa would be one of them. But
yeah, my grandkids have already said that. That would be a good
you
trail
should
name.
Be. Why not? Yeah, it's a guarantee somebody will try to call you, because remember, you can choose to accept a trail name or not. So have you thought of one yourself?
No, I'm going to let it come to me. And as you've told others, I have the right to veto or reject the names if I do not like them. So I want to see what fits. I'm going to be fluid on that and see what fits.
Sure. Well, look, Dan, I'm excited for you, because I know each one of you I'm speaking to, I'm excited. I'm probably almost as excited about your trip as you are, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how you do, if you enjoy it. What I would ask is that you contact me every couple of weeks, and we'll talk about something on the trail. And stay in touch before you go, because any changes to your plans, I always want to know those. I'll get you back on the show and we'll talk about it as well. But as always, I wish you the very best, and welcome to the Class of 23.
Thank you so very much for this opportunity. I appreciate it.
Okay, man. Take it easy, okay?
Okay.
Cheers. Bye. You've got to look at his picture. He's got a nice attitude towards the hike, and though he's a competitive fellow, I think he should really take that saying to heart: the last one to Katahdin wins. He'll need that mindset when he's out there. Don't forget, you can support our podcast in several ways, one of which is to visit our online store at hrntradingpost.com. There you're going to find all the live podcasts featured, with shirts, hoodies and mugs. There's free shipping to the US mainland, so come along and support our shows. Now, Dr. Lynn. This week she scares the living daylights out of me by telling us all about hypothermia. And for those of you heading out there this year, I just want to tell you that one night in the Smokies in 2014, I had a nightmarish night when the temperature got down to 7 degrees Fahrenheit overnight. This was in early April, so make sure you think about that when you're planning your layers and your clothing. Here's Lynn. And we're back on with Dr. Lynn. Hey, Lynn, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much.
And you sound better this week because you got a new microphone, haven't you?
Yes, I'm at my dad's, and he has this great setup for recording his memoirs. And I thought, oh, this is going to be perfect for podcasting. Perfect,
indeed, yeah. Now, we're going to talk today about hypothermia. And in the last podcast that we talked about hypothermia, you gave us information about the 2014 guidelines. But now there are 2019 guidelines. Are there any significant changes that's changed from 2014 to 2019?
Not really. What I noticed, the difference between the 2014 and the 2019 guidelines, when I read them, they were much more succinct. They were more user-friendly. And they had developed this visual called the cold card, which talks about the stages of hypothermia and also a special type of hypothermia wrap that people can use in the field.
Yeah, well, I'm funny enough, and Lynn has given me a copy of both those things. We're going to talk about them later anyway, talk in more detail about them. But we're going to make them available in a link to a Google Drive. So along with the first aid kit, which I still haven't typed up yet, so I must sort that out from last week. So you'll have available these two visuals, which are really helpful in allowing you to look at what it actually is. I'm very much a visual learner, I think, as well. So how do you define hypothermia?
Hypothermia is the unintentional drop in a body's core temperature below 35 degrees centigrade, which corresponds to 95 degrees Fahrenheit.
So from a kid, I remember 98.6 was the number we used to use. That's before we converted to decimalization. So 95, it's only about 3.5–4% down. How significant is, say, 97 or 96? And does it suddenly drop off? Do you suddenly drop off a cliff at 95?
They have to have one specific number where they can use that as the cutoff. But individual people can have higher or lower temperatures. The difference between 98.6 and 95 is where your body is getting colder, but it's still able to function.
Right.
It's still able to do all its normal processes of metabolism and keeping your body going, the heart, the lungs, the muscles, the brain. So as you drop down, the body is sensing that you're getting colder, and it creates these reflexes to try to help you keep your body temperature, your core temperature, above the 95 Fahrenheit.
And so what if you got down to 92? I mean, does it become exponentially worse?
Yes, it does.
Right.
It does. And we can talk about that. I don't know if you want to talk about that now or a little bit later.
Talk about it now, yeah.
Okay, classifications of the hypothermia. When you go below 98.6, the human body is usually at 37 degrees, 98.6. If you go below that, you can be what's called cold stressed. And that means that your body is sensing cold. The blood vessels start to constrict to retain heat, and your body starts to shiver, which helps with heat production. So that will help you to maintain your core temperature. You'll be shivering, but you'll be conscious. You'll be able to keep moving. And if you continue to keep moving, to continue to try to stay warm, if you have enough nutritional reserves to keep the body's functioning going, you can maintain your core temperature above the 95 degrees that's required.
And so at above 95, say, then you because you're doing these things, you're shivering as well. I didn't know shivering was a means for actually making you produce heat, but that's quite something. So as you're doing these things, it keeps you above 95. But if you keep dropping, do you lose the ability to shiver then and other things? And do your blood vessels change as well?
Yes. As you continue to try to keep the body warm, and if your body is not then able to keep up with the nutritional aspects and the insulation aspects, your core temperature will continue to drop. You will still continue to shiver, and you will be alert, but your movements will now be slower. They'll be impaired. Your muscles won't be able to react as well as they should be. You're not going to be able to care for yourself. Somebody else will have to help you with putting on extra layers or feeding you.
I remember that from before. Never having been in this state and not knowing what it's like. The fact that you can't actually help yourself, you think is counterintuitive because you think you would do the best you can for yourself, but you're saying you literally physically couldn't do it yourself.
Correct. And that's mild hypothermia. That's the first one is cold stress. Then you develop mild if you can't continue to keep your core temperature up above 95, then you develop what's called mild hypothermia. Again, you're still shivering, you're alert, but you need somebody to help you continue to stay warm. And if you continue to not be able to keep your core body temperature in a good range, then you actually stop shivering. That's a bad sign.
Yeah, it doesn't sound good, yeah.
Now you no longer are in mild hypothermia, or you're in what we call moderate hypothermia, where your shivering stops, so you can't generate your own body heat. Your brain will then start to slow down. Your confusion will increase. Your physical movements will be slower. You'll not be able to help yourself at all. And more importantly, if you continue to try to move a lot, you'll get something called an after drop, or you could get something called an after drop, where because your blood is circulating from the warmer core to the colder extremities, the blood that's returning from the colder extremities to the warmer core is actually colder, and it's going to actually cool your core temperature down even more. And it will create a more precipitous drop in your core temperature.
Jeez. So let's say, I don't know, New Hampshire. You're in New Hampshire What's the time scale that this can happen to you? Say it's, I don't know, say it's 18 degrees Fahrenheit, which is pretty darn cold, and you perhaps you're not layered enough or whatever. How fast can this happen to you that you get into a really bad state?
It depends on the individual.
Yeah.
It can happen very fast. What we generally say for people who are alert and awake and shivering and able to fend for themselves, when they have friends with them, if you're hiking with your friends, you should stop. You should warm up, put more layers on, drink or eat lots of warm, sugary foods to help with the metabolism, to generate heat, keep the shivering going, and wait for about 30 minutes and see how the person is doing. If they're continuing to be alert, if they're continuing to mentate well, they can tell you, for instance, what the last shelter is that they stayed at, or, you know, how many miles they went that day. Those are all little little questions that you can ask somebody to determine whether or not they're still in a good functional state. Then you could try to get up again and start walking again. But if after 30 minutes they're not any better, then you need to probably call search and rescue or SOS, and you need to then make sure that you keep the person really warm in something that we call the burrito. That's the
Let's talk about that. This is one of the two cards. Well, I think one is the reverse of the other card. So let's start actually with the cold card and then talk about the burrito wrap.
Sure. So the cold card is a visual that can help people understand where a person who might be hypothermic is in relation to their level of danger.
Sure.
The top left-hand section of the cold card shows you the cold stressed person. They're a conscious person. They're able to move around. They are shivering, and they're alert. At this point, what you want to do is you want to provide them with a high-calorie food or drink.
Sure.
That's why we drink hot chocolate in the wintertime. It's sugary, it's warm, it's got a lot of calories in it. It helps your body to be able to generate enough energy to start shivering, which will help you to warm up.
Mm-hmm.
If you have wet clothing, you can add dry layers. You can move around and exercise to warm up. Then the next section of the cold card is mild hypothermia, where you're still conscious, but you're not able to really physically move around. You're shivering, and you are able to talk a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, you continue to try to offer high-calorie, sugary food if they're alert enough to be able to chew and swallow. It's really important.
Oh, wow.
You monitor again for at least 30 minutes, and you evacuate if no improvement. You try to give heat to the upper trunk. What's the upper trunk? Your underarms, the top front part of your chest.
Uh-huh.
One of the ways to give heat to that is, in the backcountry, is to use hot water. How do you get hot water? Most of the time, people will have a stove, heat up some hot water, put it in an Nalgene bottle or a water bladder, and put it right on top of the person's chest. Make sure there's a clothing layer in between the hot water bottle and the person's skin, because you could get a skin burn if you put it directly on the skin.
Sure.
The next part of the cold card is the moderate hypothermia, where you're conscious, but you're stopped shivering. You might not be alert. You might be able to keep your eyes open and follow somebody, but you might not be able to answer questions properly.
Sure.
At this point, you want to keep the person lying down. Do not keep them standing or walking, because blood will pool in the feet, and that will drop their blood pressure, which could cause them to faint, or worse, cause their heart to stop.
Wow.
At this point, you do not give them food or drink, because they will not be able to have enough energy reserves to ingest it, and they could aspirate, which means that it could go into their lungs rather than into their stomach.
Sure.
And that's where you would start using the burrito wrap. And then severe hypothermia is they're unconscious, They're not shivering. They're very close to death at that point.
Wow. That's quite something then, really. So talk us through the burrito wrap. What actually is that?
So the burrito wrap is a way of keeping somebody warm when they can't do it themselves. It's a series of layers. You start off with the person and you wrap them in one of those emergency foil blankets.
Yep.
You've seen them all on the
sure.
Probably on the checkout line at REI, a little quick thing that you can pick up. Yeah. And I was going to say we should probably add that to our first aid list.
Yeah, probably
especially in the colder weather.
Sure.
A sleeping bag, a sleeping pad, and a tarp wrap. And I was trying to think of a way to help hikers remember this layering system. And then I realized this is exactly the same type of layering system you're doing when you're setting up your sleep system. On the ground, you have a tarp, or you have your tent floor. Then you put your sleeping pad on top of that. Then you put your sleeping bag on top of that. The only thing difference is now you have to put on top of your sleeping bag the foil emergency blanket, and then you put the person on top of the emergency blanket.
You wrap them up in a burrito.
Yes.
Basically.
So you put the person on top of the emergency blanket, and if you have those hot water bottles, those Nalgene bottles, put them under the arms, put them on top of the chest. Then you wrap up the person like you would wrap a burrito. You don't want anything falling out of the bottom. So you wrap up horizontally over the feet. Then you wrap the right side of the person and then the left side of the person. Then you're going to put them in the sleeping bag. The sleeping bag should already be open. Okay, you don't want you want the sleeping bag to surround them completely, and you want to zip up the person completely in the sleeping bag.
Right.
Then, of course, you've got the sleeping pad underneath your sleeping bag. And then you have the tarp, and the tarp gets wrapped just like the foil emergency blanket. Your feet first, horizontally, then your right side, then your left side. And then you want to tape closed your tarp, like with duct tape, or use those safety pins that are in there, or any kind of, if you have a cord, you could do that too. But don't cinch it so tight that you decrease the loft of the sleeping bag, because it's very important with the sleeping bag loft. That will help insulate the patient from losing more heat.
Sure. You've gone through it real well. I've looked at both those this morning, and I'm going to make them available to people if they want to see them, because it does help. Your description's great, but it also helps to be able to see it, even take it with them if they want to take it with them when they are out in the backcountry. So that's very helpful. Now, we've got just a couple of minutes left. Tell us a couple of the myths about hypothermia.
Sure. These were some of the things that were also in the 2019 Wilderness Medical Society section. Body-to-body rewarming, snuggling up with somebody to help them get warmer. It actually doesn't make a difference in the amount of time that the person's going to be able to warm up, whether or not they shiver for themselves or you help warm them up. They might feel a little more comfortable because they might not need to shiver so much. Right. But it doesn't really make a difference in how quickly they're going to warm up. It might make a difference, though, if it's going to delay evacuation. You don't want to do body-to-body rewarming.
Well, hang on. Why is that?
So, because you might need to be the one to help them get to safety, to a safe spot. Okay. And if you're trying to warm them up like that, you might not. You might be wasting time. Sure. That's according to the Wilderness Medical Society guidelines.
Okay.
Another myth is when a patient finally sees, oh, good, I'm going to get rescued, they might actually mentally relax. What's happening with that is they might lose that fight or flight response, and that will decrease their blood pressure, and they might actually faint or lose consciousness or develop.
So don't relax anybody then.
Yeah, you have to tell them you have to stay engaged in fighting to stay to keep surviving. Right. Yep. The game's not over at this point. So
Sure.
keep them focused on the rescue.
Yeah.
Keep them engaged. All right.
Mhm.
We talked about warming the core with Nalgene bottles. Don't use hand warmers. You would think that hand warmers are great. They're a great source of heat. But the surface area for the little hand warmers is very small, and they also have a very high surface temperature. They could create thermal burns. So not a good idea to use those.
So hand warmers are really basically just to keep your hands warm during the day. They're not.
Yes.
They're not really for effective to help rescue you.
Correct.
Right,
And
okay.
they could cause more damage than good. So just using the warm water and the burrito wrap would be better than adding the hand warmers there.
Okay, great. Any others?
Removing wet clothing. Not always necessary. If a person can remove their own wet clothing, then that's okay. But if you're in the state of the moderate hypothermia where you need to help the patient, you don't want to move their arms and legs around too much, because then you'll risk them having that, what we call that after drop, causing the colder blood to go into the core.
Wow.
And so leave the wet clothing there.
Okay.
Because the risk of moving the limbs outweighs the benefit of dry clothing.
Sure. Okay. So, I think you've covered it. You seem to have covered, certainly, Lynn's kindly written down a couple of pages, so you can read some of this stuff as well. That'll also be available in the Google Drive. I appreciate you coming on and tell us about it, because I know we talked about it last time. I remember thinking, well, that sounds a bit scary. And it doesn't sound any less scary now either. So, to know how to look after it, or at least recognize the signs, would be a really helpful thing for people going hiking in the backcountry in bad weather. So I appreciate you coming and tell us about it.
Great to be here. Anybody have any questions, please send them along to Mighty Blue, and be happy to answer them.
That's very cool. Thanks, Lynn. Take it easy, okay?
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. It's serious, isn't it? I remember being a bit terrified last time, so make sure you check out our info on hypothermia in our show notes. As Lynn said, if you have medical concerns or questions, just drop me a line at steve@hikingradionetwork.com, and I'll make sure that she gets it. And before we move on to our reading of Then the Howl Came Today, thanks go to our wonderful donors once more. This time we've had quite a bumper week with monthly donors Gal Posey, Sabre Thompson, Todd Withrow, Suzanne Johnson, Betty McInerney, Ann Pickin, Sharon James and Sean Deadwiley all stepping up again, while my friend Barry Hill gave a generous donation as well. Thanks so much, guys. Now we resume where we left off, with George Stephanos rushing through the states. Well, West Virginia and Maryland to be precise. He's about to hit Pennsylvania. It's going to be interesting to see what he thinks about everybody's favourite state. Not. I'll see you next week. Wednesday, the 13th of July, 1983, mile 1013.6. A mob of young children camped nearby last night kept me awake past 10 o'clock. One in particular. He became frightened while walking alone through the woods in the dark and ran back to his group screaming at the top of his lungs. One of the adults apparently decided that the best way to help him overcome his fears was to walk around with him in the darkened forest. The boy resisted this therapy with 2 more loud screaming fits. Either they finally gave up or the kid recovered from his phobia just about the time I was contemplating strolling over there myself and smacking Mr. Child Psychologist round a bit. I woke at about 5:15 this morning, but did not get started on the Appalachian Trail till 6:45. That was not an unusual time frame. As I've said before, I'm not a morning person. Leaving the picnic area, I passed a sign informing me that payment of a $4 fee was required for overnight camping. No one official was around at that time in the morning, and I had already wasted far too much of the coolest part of the day, so I bowed to unofficial thru-hiker tradition and left Gatland as an illegal camper and an outlaw. I decided to pass up that Coke for the road and save my change for my next true love, which, according to the Philosopher's Guide, was up ahead in Washington State Park. I had only 95 cents remaining, but I figured that I could flash that thru-hiker look, you've seen it in Care commercials, weasel a nickel out of some tourist and grab 2 sodas. I climbed out of Crampton Gap, leaving the state park. The Appalachian Trail followed the ridge crest along a combination of woods roads and paths similar to yesterday's route. At some otherwise insignificant spot along the trail between Crampton Gap and Lamb's Knoll, the highest point on the AT in southern Maryland at 1,772 feet, I passed the 1,000-mile mark on my thru-hike. 1,000 miles. I still cannot comprehend that I've walked that far. Just before Lamb's Knoll's summit, I dropped my backpack and took the 300-foot-long side trail to White Rocks. My guidebook said that the view from there should not be overlooked. I wished I had overlooked it. The bottom half of the view was screened by treetops, and the distant views provided by the upper half were non-existent due to the haze. It would not have been bad in winter, but it was a buster day. On the summit of Lamb's Knoll were a Maryland State Forest fire tower and a US government installation. Both were fenced in, but I could have climbed the fire tower illegally had I wished to. I didn't bother. I arrived at Dahlgren Campground at 10:15. Once a private campground, the place went out of business and is now owned by the state of Maryland. Bathrooms with flush toilets and hot showers are available to backpackers free of charge. I filled up my water bottle, but passed on the showers. Huge swarms of mosquitoes buzzed and fluttered about the shower stalls when I opened the door to check the place out. Those showers would have been irresistible yesterday, but the weather had moderated considerably. I hardly broke a sweat all day. The thermometer never rose above the low 80s, and the humidity dropped like a stone as the morning progressed. There was a great deal of shade along the trail, and I was caressed by the first real breezes in days. I passed through Turner's Gap, where my data book listed meals right on the AT at the South Mountain Inn. My philosopher's guide said that the place was fancy and expensive, so I reluctantly passed it up. I did spend 10 minutes reading a series of plaques which described the troop movements during the Battle of South Mountain. The main action of this Civil War engagement was fought in and around this gap, as the U.S. Army of the Potomac under General George McClellan struggled to break through the Confederate screen on South Mountain and engage Lee's Army of Northern Virginia in the valley to the west. This battle was the prelude to the Battle of Antietam, the bloodiest single day of the entire war. 2 miles past Turner's Gap, I entered Washington Monument State Park and fell in love again. My new sweetheart charged only 40 cents a can, so I was able to buy 2 sodas without the necessity of whining and crying and holding my breath for another nickel. I took them over to a nearby picnic table and sat down to lunch. At the summit of Monument Knob in the park was a 30-foot tall observatory dedicated in 1827 as a monument to the father of our country. It was rather odd-looking, a bottle-shaped stone tower. I took a walk to the top after lunch. The stale smoke and steam had moved off out over the Atlantic, leaving just the normal light haze of a July afternoon and sweeping panoramic views of a series of narrow parallel ridges and valleys. The Appalachian Trail traversed some gently rolling terrain along the ridgeline after the monument. Except for a very few viewpoints, walking the flat, densely wooded crest of South Mountain is indistinguishable from basic woodland hiking. After 3 miles of this, the AT broke out of the forest, crossed a road, passed through a narrow right-of-way between 2 houses, and crossed over Interstate 70 on a concrete footbridge. That was different. Through the wire fencing on either side, I could see streams of heavy traffic roaring past just below. After weeks of slow crawl through southern forests and small villages, that flying crush of steel and chrome seemed like another universe. I wonder what all those people made of me as I walked above, carrying my simple life on my back. Probably they envied my freedom and individuality as they rushed along through their miserable, maggot existences. At least that is the colour of the sky in my personal universe. I strode along, mean and macho, mean and macho. On the other side of I-70, the stiff climb up Pine Knob was a harbinger of things to come. I'd been told, and I could see for myself from scanning the elevation profiles on my map, that the AT becomes much more rugged in the northern half of Maryland. I stopped at Pine Knob Shelter in order to get some water. It was another real dump, filthy, decrepit, and generally falling apart. Chunks were missing from the walls. Past the shelter, the arduous climb continued, now on a badly eroded old woods road covered with rocks. Once I had reached the ridge crest, the footway became much easier, following wide old grassy roads across a broad flat plateau. The views from Annapolis Rock and Black Rock along the western rim were the best in Maryland and blew away everything since Hogback Mountain and Mount Marshall in Shenandoah National Park. Above each of these massive cliffs, hawks turned lazy circles in the afternoon sun, while below me others soared over a vast green farming valley stretched out towards the blurry grey line of the Alleghenies in the misty distance. I spent a great deal of time at each spot, feeling lucky to be there on one of the rare clear days this summer. Less than a mile past Black Rock's cliffs, I came to a junction with a side trail leading down the flank of the mountain a bit, past the ruins of an old hotel to a beautiful cold spring which gushed out of a pipe just below. I decided to make my dinner there, fill up my water bottles, and go on to find a good place to camp. The spring was located on a steep, rocky slope. Cooking and eating was a difficult juggling act. I just removed my boiling soup from the heat and set it on a towel balanced on top of my knees as I started to pack my stove away. With wonderful dexterity, I managed to spill half of the scalding soup all over my right thigh. I'm now sporting a large, impressive burn. While I was eating what was left, a stocky man who looked to be about 40 came by and asked me if this was the spot where the spring was located. He left and returned a few minutes later with his wife. We talked briefly while they got water. They told me of several good campsites a few hundred feet up the trail. Too bad I did not think to check this out before making dinner on that awkward shelf, but was one more scar on this adventure. When I finished, I reloaded my backpack and walked to the campsites. The couple I had just met were there pitching their tent and fixing dinner. They kindly offered me a hot dog, which helped to make up for some of my lost meal. The man had just quit his job and was going to spend the summer getting in shape for an Appalachian Trail thru-hike he and a friend were planning for next year. His wife, who was remarkably good-humoured about his radical life decision, said that when his elderly mother heard about the plan, she told him that he was an and his friends were all bums. We sat up for a while, talking and laughing. I passed on much of what I had learned thus far on my own hike. Before I went to bed, the lady asked me if I liked Pop-Tarts. Well, kind of. She gave me an entire box that they had bought for the trip on the advice of a friend but did not care for. Thus ended the terrible Pop-Tart withdrawal through which I have been agonising since Harper's Ferry. Cold soda right on the trail, and now these two generous people. I guess you could say that Maryland has been very good to me. Things are beginning to break incredibly fast now. On Monday, I finally polished off Virginia. Tuesday, took care of West Virginia. Today, Wednesday, I passed the 1,000-mile mark. Tomorrow, I will enter Pennsylvania. No big milestones are on tap for Friday, but on Saturday I will cross the halfway point of the entire Appalachian Trail. Thursday, the 14th of July, 1983, mile 1034.5. I didn't get out on the trail today until 7:15. I've been doing a good job of getting early starts back in Shenandoah. It pays to get in as much of your mileage as you can while it's still relatively cool when you're backpacking in July. However, personally, once I get into a cycle of getting to bed late and waking up late, it's almost impossible for me to break that cycle unless I take a short mileage day. I do not have any of those planned until Monday when I head into Duncannon. I like the schedule I've already set up. I guess I'll just have to live with late starts in the meantime. I followed some seriously rocky trail today. I was less than 100 miles from the infamous rocks on central and eastern Pennsylvania, but their cousins have already begun to appear here and there along the Appalachian Trail in Maryland. About 2 miles from my campsite, I traversed a dangerous section in which underbrush, much of it briars and stinging nettle, covered a footpath liberally strewn with loose and shifting stones. It was difficult to make decent time over this stretch, where I often could not even see the uneven footway. Being too pig-headed to slow down, I was lucky to make it through it all without spraining an ankle. Later in the day, I passed a solitary mailbox set on a post next to the trail in the middle of a forest. I opened the door to see what the hell it was and found a register left by a local man who was a 1982 thru-hiker. He wrote that there was a soda machine on the front porch of the South Mountain Rod and Gun Club a couple of miles ahead, right on the Appalachian Trail. I was psyched. Yesterday's cool spell had ended after one day in a row. It was sweltering in the 90s once again, and the humidity was soaring. You might say I was slightly disappointed to find that a brand new relocation now took the AT round the gun club. The trail dipped abruptly, almost straight down the mountain, along a pile of rocks, then immediately climbed straight back up the mountain. Almost out of order, I was counting on an ice-cold Coke for a big lift. Instead, I nursed a few ounces of blood-warm water along the steep, rocky climb up Buzzard's Knob, which followed. Fortunately, the spring I found near the summit was cold and tasty. I chugged water until I almost threw up to prepare myself for the 7-mile stretch of waterless trail which was on tap. My body can handle long, dry hikes now, but they still take a lot out of me. I needed to be strong for the infamous high rock relocation, which would soon follow. The Appalachian Trail descended into Raven Rock Hollow before climbing steeply among some cliffs. It continued to climb more gradually along the ridge crest, then it left the crest and slabbed the western side of the mountain. The footway was extremely rocky, but the going was rather easy. I soon came to the start of the high rock relocation. This new trail now left the ridge 1/10 of a mile before High Rock, so I dropped my backpack at the junction and followed the old trail up. High Rock had excellent views north and west of the Cumberland Valley in Pennsylvania and a takeoff platform for hang gliders. One was airborne as I arrived. I sat and watched for a few minutes and shot some pictures of the views. The stifling humidity limited visibility, but the enormous valley lay dreamlike beneath the mists. Finally, I decided not to postpone the inevitable any longer. I walked back to my pack and started down the new trail. The old AT had followed the asphalt road from High Rock down into Penmar. The relocation was a mess. More than a mile longer than the road and very rough. It scoured down the faces of huge boulders, descending about 400 feet in a half mile, then zigzagged back and forth across the face of the mountain a few times over masses of loose rocks. Next, it climbed for a short distance over fields of loose boulders mixed with smaller stones, before finally following smooth woods roads past several heaping piles of garbage. This last section was very lovely if you're an ardent admirer of landfills. Entering Penmar Park was a relief. In the years around 1900, this spot was billed as the Coney Island of the Blue Ridge, with 7 hotels and about 100 boarding houses. After years of slow decline, the amusement park was forced out of business by World War II gas rationing in 1943. Washington County, Maryland, had taken over this long-neglected spot and transformed it back into a thing of beauty. The rides were gone, but numerous attractive pavilions and picnic areas were scattered along its grassy slopes overlooking the Cumberland Valley to the west. Scores of picnickers were enjoying the warm mid-July afternoon. The couple I had met at that old hotel site last night told me there might be a snack bar in the park. I was too overheated to be feeling very hungry, but a cold soda or two would have hit the spot. The contents of my canteen had long since turned to bathwater in the oppressive heat. Each drink I took from it almost made me gag. Not seeing anything resembling a snack bar as I glanced around, I asked an elderly lady passing by if there was a soda machine or a snack bar where I could pick up a cold drink. No dice. She took one look at my sweat-drenched T-shirt and quivering lower lip and offered to get me one of hers. Before I could say, "Please don't bother," she was off, and I was chatting with the elderly gentleman who was a companion. He told me that they entertained at convalescent homes in the area and gave me a sampling of his corny old jokes. I didn't mind. He was a nice old guy, and I would have listened to Lawrence Welk right about then for a cold drink. I even laughed at the jokes. He had a nice sense of comedic timing and a good delivery, and I was probably a little delirious from heat and fatigue. The lady returned with 2 cold sodas, for which she refused to accept money. We chatted pleasantly for a few minutes as they gave me some more of their personal history and some of the parks. Eventually, they excused themselves to continue their stroll, and I resumed my hike. I soon left the park, crossing the state line into Pennsylvania a couple of minutes later. After almost 2.5 months of hiking, I was finally back in the northeast, 6 states down and 8 to go.